This is going to be the second video in a series on making a Turkish twist recurve fighter. So this is what we came up with in episode 1, and this is it's about 9.25 inches long from blade edge here, and it's about 1/4 inch thick. And I did intentionally leave it thick because with a twist pattern, the further you grind into it, the better the pattern is in it. So this was a billet that I had left over from a previous project. So I wanted to make a fighter like this. It's going to have an S guard down here. And so yeah, we're going to get the profile all ground out, fine-tuned a little bit, and then grind in the bevels, do some rough grinding, be ready for heat treat. Maybe if we have time, we'll get to thermal cycling and the heat treatment today. All right, let's get started. So first things first, what we want to do is we're going to draw out the profile on here that we want. This is forged fairly close to the shape that I want. If you see, I do have a D-lam down here, but this tang is way long for what I need. So that will all be cut off. It is not going to be a through tang. It's just going to be a hidden tang. And I don't know if you can see, but on here, you can see that Turkish twist pattern I have. Now there's 4 separate layers of twist. So the twist runs this way on this bar, this way on this bar, this way on this one, and back this way on the bottom one. So when we grind down through into that, it should reveal that pattern and make it more interesting the deeper you grind. So that is why I left it so thick. So anyway, next thing that we're going to do is we're going to draw out the profile on here with a Sharpie, and then we'll take it over to the grinder and start grinding. So what I want to do is just take a look at that and see the profile that I'm going for. It's actually fairly close. Just flatten that top out. May end up putting just a little bit of a curve down into that clip right there, because it's more than likely, well, not more than likely, it is going to have a false edge that's going to come down in here like this and out to the tip. We're going to take a little bit more off of the belly of this right here, bring it in, and that recurve is pretty good. Take that up maybe just a little bit. We want to grind away everything on the edge, so when we can scribe the line, we'll be able to see our scribe marks. And this is going to come probably, and again, this is just a rough estimate of what I'm going to do with this knife. Bring these shoulders in up about there, and everything will be fine-tuned more when we get closer to, or after heat treat. Everything will be moved in exactly where I want it. So this is just going to be roughing it in and thinning it down. So we're going to do the profile first, and then I'm going to take it to the surface grinder and grind down the surface of both sides and thin it down. I'm thinking that I'm going to take it down to about 3/16 of an inch. So, and maybe just a hair under that. We'll see what everything looks like when we get to that point. First thing I did is I've got a fairly used, just old aluminum oxide belt that I'm going to use to take off this forge scale. When you're grinding like this, it can really chew up a new belt and make a new belt no good pretty fast. So I use an old belt just to clean up all the forge scale off of all the sides, get these parts roughed in, and then we'll take it over to the surface grinder. ahead and so now we're going to go ahead and cut this tang off. We're going to leave it plenty long. I may end up cutting it off some more. That right there is more than enough. I'm going to cut it right there. So that is more than enough, but we'll get this cut off and get it on the surface grinder. First thing before I put it on the surface grinder, I want to take a bunch of the scale off, especially in the ricasso area right here. So that's where it's going to set flat. And as you can see, it rocks right now. It's going to set flat on the surface grinder. So we need it to sit. This side's pretty good, but this side's got some chunks on it that need to come off. So we'll get those off there real quick. This is my surface grinder attachment. I made this, I don't know, several years ago. Just by seeing some plans online. It's got electromagnets, 3 of them right here. Take the blade and magnet it right here. It's like that. I'm gonna have to scoop this out just a little bit. So it's got micro adjustment knob right here. I've got a used 36 grit Actitrox belt on here because the forge scale, it will chew up fairly new blade or new belts. It will chew those up. So we're just going to try to take roughly the same amount off of both sides. I'm going to try to keep track of, it's got micro measurements right here. I keep track of how much I'm going in and take off both sides. So we'll get started on that. That's looking pretty close on this side. So one nice thing about these electromagnets is when you get done with the one side, that grinder dust, you can just wipe that off with your hand. Those that have the magnetic chucks with those neodymium magnets that are in there, that grinder dust is really hard to get off there. But these electromagnets, you turn them off, wipe that off, flip your knife back over, and turn them on, and you're ready to do the other side. All right, now that I got both sides done, I'm going to take it and measure how thick we are. I still think we're a little thick, but I want to measure that thickness on there. I want to get it down to about 187 thousandths. So I want to also test etch it real quick and just to see what the pattern looks like on both sides, so I know if I need to take more off of one side than the other to try to get the pattern to match. All right, so what I'm talking about on the pattern that I wanted to do a test etch to make sure it's the same on both sides. So on the billet that I started with, the Turkish twist, so it has 4 different bars that were forge welded together like this. So each bar was twisted, and one bar twists this way, and the other bar twists this way, and then the next one this way, the next one this way. So if you just forge this down to the thickness that I wanted, that's what the pattern would look like on the outside of the blade. But as we grind into it, those patterns will start turning into like little stars and on the each individual bar, and they will turn into these cool looking like little stars. The more and little twists and stuff like that, and it's just a really cool pattern the more you grind into it. Well, if I grind in more on one side than the other, I might wind up with a pattern similar to this on one side, and then a really nice pattern on the other side, which this is a very ugly drawing. But yeah, these stars and twists, just weird things like that, and they look really nice. And so I want both sides to look like this. So I don't want one side to have this pattern on it and one side to have this. It just wouldn't look right. So I just realized I drew on my whiteboard with a Sharpie. So we're gonna see if I can get that off of there. Right now, we'll get a little test etch in here. Make sure both sides are somewhat the same anyway. You can see some of those spirals starting to show up on this side instead of just the straight lines. Same on this side. And as I grind into the bevels, or grind the bevels in too, it's going to help quite a little. But it looks to me like I can go ahead and do a little bit more on both sides, maybe thin it down just a little bit, because I think I'm right at about 200 thousandths. So I need to come down about another 15 to 20 thousandths, somewhere in there. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. We have the blade, surface ground to about, I think it's 220 grit. We are 186 thousandths at the ricasso. So next thing we're going to do, we're going to scribe some lines on the edge. So we center our edge. We're going to scribe all the way around, just so we know, we can see, especially for putting in the false edge up here, the clip, we'll know where the center line is to grind to. So that's where we're going to go to next. All right, so we have the knife over here. We are going to run a center line down that with this height gauge, and it was a cheap height gauge I got off of Amazon, and I had some carbide, whatever those are, for milling and that kind of thing. I just super glued that onto the end of it there, so I can scribe steel a lot easier. I also have this chunk of granite for my surface plate. You can find those about anywhere. Anybody that's done a sink, that's where I got this. My cousin was redoing his house, or building a house, and this came from a sink or something cut out. And so that's where I got this one. What we're going to do is we're going to measure the thickness of, let's see, turn that on. Measure the thickness here, the ricasso as it sits. This says 190. Let's zero that up. 190. So we are going to go half of that, which would be 95 or 96 and a half right there. And then we will go ahead and scribe all the way around on one side. We'll flip the knife over and we'll do scribe again on this side. And now should be able to see that. Yep, that scribe line right there. All the way around. You want to make sure your grind lines on your edge are going this way, so when you scribe you can see it a lot easier. If your grind lines are going this way, it's hard for you to see it. But anyway, you can see that we have a scribe line all the way around there. So now we can start grinding and rough grinding the bevels. So the first thing that I want to do with this to start grinding in the bevels right here is I want to use an old grinder belt. So as you put this up here like this to set that bevel edge, that sharp edge will rip a whole bunch of grit right off of your good belts. So I'm going to just take that first edge off of both sides, this side and then this side, and then I will get me a new Actitrox 36 grit belt. Those things are amazing. So I'm going to start right there. I'm not going to bring my bevels all the way back here. That will be after heat treat. I will bring those back there, and then we may end up bringing this heel a little further forward just to match the plunge lines that we'll get in. But right now we're just rough grinding. We're not going to do anything set in stone yet, you know, super close to where we need to be. It's just going to be a rough grind and ready for heat treat. So I jumped the gun just a little bit on this. I started grinding in my bevels, and I like to put in my false edge before I do my bevels. So I got a little bit in a hurry here, and I'm glad I caught myself before I ground up too much. It's really nice to have a really flat side to put in that false edge. I will show you how I set that up here really fast. All right, so what we're going to do here, I have my angle finder, and we're going to zero it out. Okay, we're zeroed out, and I loosened up my table here. We'll tip this table out, and usually, if I remember correctly, it's right around 60 degrees. And if I'm wrong on the angle, I can always come back in here and change it. So we're going to have this. This is why I like to do this before I grind in my bevels, because you can set this up here flat. We're going to start that right there, and we're just going to work that along there and bring that micro bevel up here where your false edge is. We're going to bring that down. Bring it down from top. I'm going to do that both sides, just like that. And that's how we're going to do it. We're going to change the angle even a little bit more. So let's see where we're at. About 76 degrees. 77. All right, now that I got both sides of the false edge or the clip put in there, and it will get more fine-tuned after heat treat. This is just roughing it in. We can get back to grinding these bevels. So. So that's where we are so far. Looking pretty decent. All right, so I'm going to call that good for the 36 grit. See both sides there, pretty even. You want, before you heat treat, you want both sides fairly even. That'll reduce the risk of warping. But also you can see right here on the heel, there's still some forge scale and stuff here, but that stuff will all go away when I move this plunge line back. It's on both sides there, but that will all go away. But as of right now, it's starting to look pretty good. I can't complain too much. I think I'll bump it up another couple grits just to get rid of those deep scratches. Sometimes those can cause stress risers and cause cracks when you heat treat. So I'm going to bump it up at least 120 grit and go from there. All right. So I got it ground up to 120 grit. Clip is in there. It was already at 120. Some of my bevels are all at 120. Let's see if you can see the thickness that I have on there is probably somewhere around 40 thousandths or so right now. I will bring that down after heat treat to probably somewhere around 15 thousandths. And then I will also bring in the clip just a little bit tighter because it is, I don't know, it's pretty thick right here. I can bring it in some more. So, and then I'll even up the shoulders on there as well. Anyway, so right now I think we're ready to normalize this, thermocycle it. So I'm going to get the heat treat oven going right now. So we're going to pick the carbon steel heat treat. And then takes it up to 1525 degrees. We're going to do that. Oops. Start. Okay. Carbon steel heat treat. Start. There. Anyway, 1525 degrees. We will take it up to that temperature and then we will let it cool. And then we'll take it up to about 1400 degrees and let it cool, and about 1250 degrees and let it cool for the grain reduction cycles. And then we will take it back up to 1525 degrees and heat treat it. So while we're waiting for that heat treat oven to warm up, to come up to temperature, I thought it would be fun to do a little test etch, see how things are coming along, see what the pattern's looking like for us. So there you can start seeing the pattern that I was talking about. A lot of the swirls and stuff like that. Here is the other side. There, get in the right light, see better. So there's a couple more things that we need to do before we heat treat. So on the spine, there is 36 grit scratches on the spine all the way to the tip and all the way on the edge. Now those scratches can cause cracks in the heat treat. So we are going to take this over and grind those smooth so we can not have that issue. And then one more thing that we're going to do is I'm going to stamp my maker's mark in there on the first grain reduction cycle that I do. I'm going to do my maker's mark, and it is right here. That is what is called a mill iron. All right, the heat treat oven is up to temperature. We are going to get this in there. Get this as centered and as straight as I can. All right, let's get that off of the anvil so it doesn't suck too much heat out of it. And there is the maker's mark. You can see that pattern really showing up right now. Looking pretty cool. I see lots of stars in there that I didn't see before. Pretty neat. So we are at 1250 degrees. We are ready for the last grain reduction cycle. So we'll get the knife in there and then I'll talk a little bit about why it is I'm doing this. So I want to talk a little bit about the grain reduction cycling process. So as you forge weld steels together, especially Damascus steels, when you're forge welding them together, the grain tends to grow. And as that grain grows, with each high heat that you take the steel to, even with just regular forging, you will get the grain growth. And so you want to bring that grain back to its original, the way it was originally in the steel before you started forge welding, whatever with it. So you take the steel and you heat it to 1525 degrees or 1550 degrees, and you let that cool down to black. And then you take it to 14, cool to black, 1250, and cool to black. What that does is it takes those grains that have grown over the whole forging process, and it takes those grains and it shrinks them back down. So the reason you don't want a large grain is because during the heat treat, after you heat treat, it will have those large grains, and those grains make the blade brittle and more easily broken. And you can chip edges, you can break a knife completely in half. So you want to do those grain reduction cycles to bring that grain back down to the size that it was before you started all that and all the forging and everything. And so that will make a very strong blade, a lot stronger than it would be if you didn't do that.
And of course, on the heat treatment of my knife, my microphone died, so there is no audio with this section of the video.
All right, so here it is out of the heat treat. Here is, you can start to see that pattern really showing up. There we go. On this side. I think. Anyway, so I have a 60 HRC file. These are cheap files, but they give you kind of an idea, if they've hardened, or kind of roughly about where we're at on the hardness scale. So this is a 60 HRC, and it should skate this no problem. And it does. There's no biting whatsoever. So I'm sure that it's up over that. Anyway, so now that my heat treat oven is still at very high temperature, sometimes these knives can crack just from the stress of the quenching process and hardening process. So I have this little toaster oven. I am going to do a snap temper in there just quickly up to about 400 degrees. It looks like I have it set at 400. And just take any of that stress away that might cause it to crack as my heat treat oven is cooling down. And then as soon as it's cooled off, then I will do two-hour cycles at about 425 degrees on this. So yeah, that pattern's really starting to show up. I love it. Okay, so that's going to do it for this episode, the second episode in this series of the Turkish twist recurve fighter. Um, Next episode, we will do the final grinding, probably some hand sanding, and maybe fit a guard if we get that far. If not, we might even fit the handle if we get that far. We'll see. See how things go. Thanks for watching.